Hey, I'm going to dispense with our opening music because I just have a song in my heart every time he shows up. I don't need music to start the show. You know what I'm saying, Lance Stormy?
Unfortunately.
Hey, long-time friend of this program, great guy and public servant, Dave Taylor, 15th District State Representative, is in. Talk a little bit about his run for re-election. Dave, good morning. Good to see you.
Hey, good morning, guys. It's always good to see you. Thanks for having me in.
It's always fun when you come in, and we appreciate your passion and the stands that you take on behalf of the Valley. So good to have you here. All right, so we're hearing what's the thin margin that exists in the House now, and it's important that for conservatives to think that you get elected and maybe one more person who's not gets elected and maybe move things along a little bit. What's your take on the situation in Olympia?
Well, for the last 2 years, we've been in a 50-48, very narrow Democrat majority in the House, and I think we got a pretty good shot this year of actually picking up the 2 seats to gain the majority. If we pick up one, we're in a functional tie, which in a lot of ways, from the standpoint of taxpayers, may not be a bad thing. Yeah. You know, you're not going to pass a whole bunch of laws. You're not going to pass a whole bunch of new tax increases. So
a tactical tie, right?
A tactical tie may not be all that bad, but for obvious reasons, I would certainly like to see us in a majority and be able to move the ball forward on a lot of the things we've been working on now for, in my case, 8 years.
Yeah, if Republicans pick up more than one seat in the House, they'll take outright control for the first time since 98.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Will things get done, though, then?
Well, do things get done now?
Thank you.
I mean, I would like to think that we would, as a Republican majority in the House, that we would, in fact, bring forward legislation that would benefit the people of Washington. You would still have a slim majority, so you would still have to negotiate the bills in order to get it passed. If it's too far right, maybe you lose some of the moderate Republican vote in the Republican caucus. If it's too far left, then you lose the conservative vote in the Republican caucus. So I think what you'll see very similar legislation, frankly, that you've seen over the last 2 years. The difference would be, I think, on the issues itself. So land use, water rights, water storage, regulatory reform, those are going to be hot issues in a Republican majority, and I think we can get them through and then ultimately to the governor for signature.
Well, you've been in the legislature since 2009.
Yep.
First elected in 2009. Why do you want to go back? Why should people send you back?
Unfinished business.
Right on.
You know,
like what?
Well, reg reform is one of my biggest points. And you look at 2015. When I say reg reform, regulatory reform, 2015, Washington state agencies adopted more than 6,500 pages of rules. Okay, that's after the legislature left town. That's after all the legislation that was proposed, worked its way through the process, was passed both houses and signed by the governor. So as a business owner or a landowner, you follow the legislative process. You work within your own industry with your lobbyists to ensure that whatever's being proposed has a minimal impact. The legislature goes home and you breathe a sigh of relief, right? Only to find out 6 months later that now the Department of Ecology or the Department of Commerce or L&I have taken what the legislature passed, interpreted what they meant, and adopted rules to implement. We need, as a legislative body, to retake control of that process, to pass laws that are sufficiently clear to not necessitate rule writing and provide that certainty to the business and property owners so they can have predictability each and every year of what they're going to be dealing with.
Is there any sort of support other than by the conservatives for a final say provision where promulgated rules by agencies have to come back through for one last look and a sign-off?
Some. Unfortunately, it's pretty issue-specific. So over the last couple of years, one of the hot topics has been flame retardants and the impacts, the health impacts that those may have for firefighters and small children. And so we've worked on that several years now and finally got out of the House an amendment proposed that would have actually provided the legislature 2 look-backs. Couldn't get that amendment adopted, but as that conversation has continued, I think we've been able to demonstrate that, look, sometimes the agencies go overboard. Everybody acknowledges that. That's the reason half the laws that are proposed come up. It's to address an agency interpretation, right? So I think there's we're gaining some momentum on that. The problem is there are right now at least, certain issues that just you can't touch. And unfortunately, one of those issues continues to be land use, specifically Land Use Growth Management Act issues, and to some extent water issues.
Can't touch because the other side, it's a hot button, or because of federal law?
Oh, no, it's strictly political, and it's the House Democrat majority, a majority of the majority, like the Growth Management Act, and see anything that would reduce or actually increase property rights and increase local flexibility is a bad thing.
Yeah, government grab.
Right.
All right, so unfinished business. Certainly we can see that. One of the bits of yes, Lance.
Well, I was going to say unfinished business is certainly the McCleary decision. I mean,
I see.
Oh yeah,
interrupt me for the McCleary, is that it? I see. Can I start paying you $10,000 a day, $100,000 a day?
Now, what's going on with that? I mean, are we really paying that?
No, we're not. Look, so I'm a guy who believes in the Constitution, and I believe in separation of powers. And when you go to the Washington State Constitution, there's only one body that can appropriate funds, and that is the legislature. We're the only ones that can create the account. We direct the treasurer to do so. We're the only ones that can actually appropriate that money.
It has not been appropriated, and it's not sitting in an account somewhere, right?
That is correct. It is not.
Is that a violation?
Well,
of the court's order?
It may be, but it's constitutional. So just because a court orders something doesn't mean their order's constitutional. It's evidence of law. It's not law itself. I mean, that is from the very basic foundation of this country, very foundation of constitutional law. The bigger issue with McCleary is going to continue to be how do we address the quote unquote fully funded and not only adequate but fair. And what the court has done is created this legal doctrine called constitutional concrete, meaning at any point if the legislature declares something basic education, it is now on the hook forever to fully fund that as part of basic education. So we've seen over the last several years, and since I've been there, an expansion of what basic education is beyond what I think it was House Bill 2261 in 2009, beyond even what that said basic education was. We need, in my humble opinion, to get back to truly what basic education is. And in doing so, we need to actually increase the local flexibility to meet that definition. So, in a perfect world, if I was in charge for a day, we would create sideboards that said, here you go. Here are the basic standards that we want kids to graduate with. And then leave it to the local school districts to actually develop the curriculum that meets that need. So if Sunnyside or Grandview or Sela decides, you know what, we think Metal Shop, based on our analysis and the curriculum of it, of Metal Shop, can provide and can satisfy a math requirement because they are actually hands-on utilizing math skills to build whatever they're doing, then we're going to use that for a math class. Not every kid is going to learn from a book. They don't. We've created a system that is a cookie-cutter system. We think every kid is going to learn the same way, and we're going to put every one of them out of school at a level to go directly to college. Number one, every kid's not going to go to college, and number two, every kid doesn't want to go to college.
Interesting. So your fellow seatmate from the 13th District, Matt Manwiller, has basically concluded that the Supreme Court's more or less mandating an income tax in order to have a funding source going forward. Do you interpret things that way too? Not that it happens, but that's...
I wouldn't go so far as to say they're mandating an income tax as the only solution out there. I think it's clear they're mandating a tax increase. How else do you fund $5.4 billion of additional revenue? If the legislature doesn't show up this year, in 2017, it just decides we're not coming, the state's revenue will grow by $3 billion in natural growth. Just automatic. where's the rest of it come from? Well, it's tax increases. And here's where it gets crazy. So the state of Washington is in contempt for failing to fully fund education. Let's assume for a second that the legislature says, fine, here's your income tax. Okay? The voters, it goes on the ballot as a referendum, and the voters fail that. Will the court then hold the voters of Washington State in contempt for failing to fully fund education?
Can't wait to find out.
Wow.
I've always wanted to be in contempt of the Supreme Court.
Right. They've created this mess. Wow. I mean, an absolute mess that there's really only one way out.
Great question.
Well, it starts with the definition of what does a fully funded education system look like and is expected to do. And as you say, giving local considerations. There are schools with a large majority of folks that might be dual language people. Do their requirements to get to where they need to get to different than Bellevue's? Of course they are, and so does one approach fit both? No, it doesn't. Have that sort of flexibility that you're talking about, Dave. I mean, now we're into common sense, and of course we know that's in short supply over there sometimes when, partisan politics digs in its feet, right?
Unfortunately, yes. Over the last couple of years, we've actually had a lot of success, at least in the House, in moving what we think are some common sense pieces of legislation in the education realm. I've worked really hard with Chris Reichdahl, who's not going to be in the legislature after this year, really looking at standardized testing and trying to reduce the number of standardized tests that we put in front of our kids each and every year. You talk to the school districts, and the sense that I get is they feel like all we do is test. And in order to do that, we have to teach in such a way that the kids are introduced to material that's on the test. And I come from a family of teachers. My grandfather was a teacher. Both my parents are retired teachers. I was raised by teachers. There's a reason that you become a teacher. You love kids, and you have a drive to think outside the box to meet the kids' needs. To go, you know what, Billy's not getting this. Let me think of a different way to present the material. That's what they do. And I'm afraid, and the teachers that I talk to tell me, look, we don't have that kind of flexibility, and frankly, we don't have the time to do it because we've got to deal with the test.
I'm hearing that now in a second-year teacher, my wife.
Yeah.
Really coming to that same conclusion rather rapidly. So moving forward then, obviously dealing with that, it sounds like the state's economy is perking along well enough so that, like you said, there'll be a $3 billion show up, whether you guys show up or not, just as things are going, right? Then how would a change at the top of the governor's office make much of a difference to what you guys do and what the job is?
Yes and no. I mean, much like the president of the United States, really, what's the governor doing? I mean, he can sign laws, he can veto laws, and they can pass executive orders. Really, other than that, they're setting policy for their agencies. The political direction or the policy direction at the agency level. A Republican governor, you'd see new department heads, which I would assume is going to change the direction of the individual agencies. Really, the important place is at the legislative level, because that's where the laws are being debated. That's where the laws are being crafted that ultimately get implemented. So, I think, frankly, a Republican-controlled Senate, Republican-controlled House will have a bigger impact, more lasting impact, a positive impact on the people of Washington than even just the governor's mansion.
I wish we had more time, Dave Taylor. It's always informative and fun and interesting to chat with you, but we appreciate your time. We wish you the best of good luck, and hopefully we'll be chatting with you down the road.
Thanks a lot, guys.